Welcome to Money Matters. I'm Emily Johnson, Certified Financial Planner and Managing Director of Polaris Capital Advisors. Today we're going to turn our focus away from the world of investments and to a topic in financial planning that is just a fact of life in strong economies and in weak economies, and that is divorce. This is a topic and a scenario which I work with frequently, and I have for several years. And while divorce is always a financial challenge, even for those families with significant wealth, this particular economy has made splitting up even more difficult. For example, many families have homes and investment properties that are underwater and thus can't be sold to facilitate a split or possibly provide equity for the parties to reestablish themselves. Credit is also an issue right now. Whether or not the house is underwater, whether or not one party can refinance is also going to be an issue. Retirement accounts may be down from where they were post-2008, or loans may have been taken against them. They could have possibly even taken funds out of a retirement account to get through a difficult cash flow period. Also, many of employers have frozen contributions to employer-based retirement plans. Pensions are a thing of the past for most employers. These are some of the mainstays of divorce settlements in the past that are no longer just assumptions that we can rely on. Earnings of one or both parties may be depressed or maybe even non-existent, and new opportunities in the job market for spouses who have been out of the workforce are probably going to be more difficult to come by. If you have a spouse that hasn't been working for several years, it's going to be difficult for that person to become newly employed. So in reality, while one spouse may feel that the other is timing the divorce opportunistically, let's say if they feel that the spouse that has the down income is now looking to divorce because now is the time that they're going to have depressed wages and limited growth, the same could be said in the reverse, that in an up economy where a family's financial life is going gangbusters, divorces can be viewed just as opportunistically. So it really just depends on the perspective that we're looking at. The bottom line is, similar to planning for a family and looking to start a family, it is a hard fact of life that there is just no perfect time to get divorced, regardless of how the timing may be perceived. And the second hard fact is that rarely are both parties on the same page at the same time that the divorce is filed. Oftentimes, one spouse is just surprised by the filing, perhaps they're in denial, or just flat out does not want the divorce. So the result of these two hard facts is that it becomes very challenging for this spouse to make, for the spouse that is surprised or perhaps in denial, to make rational and informed financial decisions when it is rational and informed financial decisions that are paramount at this point in time. In fact, oftentimes, divorce is the single most important financial decision that a grown married individual, especially one who's not the prime breadwinner in the family, will ever make. So that is exactly what we're going to focus on today, because it is an extremely important topic. There are lots of directions that we can go with this, but today I want to help identify the top 5 steps that have to be taken as soon as possible, either prior to a divorce if you're considering a divorce, or as soon after filing as possible, to help make appropriate and rational financial decisions at a time when often emotions threaten to take over. So we'll be right back to discuss these top 5 actions that we want to take if we are looking down the barrel of a divorce. Please stay with us. We'll be right back with Money Matters. Welcome back to Money Matters. Today we're talking about the top 5 steps that you want to take if you're considering getting divorced or if you're subject to a divorce right now. And I want to premise this discussion by saying first and foremost that I am not a lawyer, nor do I play one on TV, nor am I a mediator. My role in the divorce process is that of a financial expert, sometimes an advocate for one side in the divorce, helping that person develop a sound understanding of the family's financial picture, his or her needs post-divorce, and the impact of various settlement arrangements on that individual's financial future. On occasion, I serve as a financial neutral, assisting both sides in reaching mutually beneficial financial settlements, but I am not a lawyer, so I want to premise this discussion with that. We're going to focus this discussion on the financial aspects of divorce. So, beginning, frequently there's a team you're going to hire a team of advisors, not only divorce and family law attorneys, but also corporate attorneys, accountants, insurance agents, mortgage lenders, human resources, benefits advisors, mental health specialists. Each of these individuals serves a really important role in helping parties make informed decisions during the divorce process. We're going to bring in David Kroll later in the show, who's a mortgage lender, to dig into one of his topics a little bit more deeply. But on that note, let's dig in specifically in greater depth to these top 5 steps that should be taken, whether 1, you're considering or initiating a divorce, or 2, you found out that you are now going to be subject to a separation or a divorce action. So my experience has been that one spouse has often been considering divorce for some period of time, often years, and during that time has thought through the financial implications of the divorce and has come to grips with the likely outcomes. While the other spouse may or may not even have a clue that divorce is on the horizon, may be in denial, or may just flat out not want a divorce, and that spouse is oftentimes surprised when the other spouse files and that individual is forced to make lasting financial decisions at a time when their emotions are completely in overdrive. Sometimes this emotional upheaval is even the strategy of the departing spouse. So what steps should be taken, again, whether you're considering the possibility of divorce or recently filed upon? Number 1, you want to gather all the financial documents that you can get your hands on. This can sometimes be more difficult than it seems. You need to get bank and credit card statements, including copies of checks. Ideally, you want to gather these documents for a period of 12 to 36 months, but any period of time is helpful. And this is going to be for all accounts: operating accounts, savings accounts, business accounts, etc. Retirement and investment statements. Again, typically a period of several months is best, but whatever you can get your hands on. Tax returns, business and personal. If you're engaged in a family business, you definitely want to have the business tax returns. Again, a few years is best. Insurance statements, benefit statements, not only including health benefits, but also your retirement plan benefits, pension benefits, stock options, life insurance that are offered through your employer. Mortgage statements for primary and all investment property. A list of assets, whether it's either appraised value or assumed values. Oftentimes appraisals at this point in time are difficult when it comes to their accuracy. So assumed values is fine, just a list. You definitely want to include homes, other real property, cars, if you want to use Kelley Blue Book, boats, etc. Any specific furniture, jewelry, art, rugs, anything of particular value that you think might be brought up in the divorce. And also a list of expenses for you and for your children if they're still minors in your home. And also a list of expenses for your children if they are routinely paid for college, for your kids' insurance, etc. So big note here, if you don't have access to these statements for some reason, make sure you go ahead and contact your bank as soon as possible, especially for those accounts that you are a joint holder on. So that you can begin to obtain that information. It can often take quite a bit of time, so it's typically best to begin early. If your spouse controls access to accounts online, etc., if they've perhaps changed passwords and you're still in communication, consider requesting that data from your spouse if you can. You can get a full list of all the information that you need on my website, but by requesting this information in advance, you can often avoid future delays and future expenses. So that's number 1. Number 2, pull your credit report. It sounds really boring, really rote, but 1, you want to make sure that you are always aware of all accounts that have been opened either by you or possibly on your behalf. And while it's not necessarily appropriate, it's not odd either for one spouse to have obtained credit in the other's name without that spouse's knowledge. So make sure that you're aware of all liabilities for which you're responsible, because whether you opened that credit card account or not, you are on the hook for it. So make sure that you know every single asset that's in your name. The other reason that the credit cards or that the credit report can be useful is because it can help you, if there is an open account, to perhaps identify assets that are tied to liabilities that you are not aware of. For example, if property is held in another state that there was a mortgage taken out for, if there's cars that have been purchased with financing that you're actually on the hook for, you might not know that those assets exist and you find out about the liability. That's number 2. Number 3, seek guidance. Obtain a consult from a family law attorney as soon as you possibly can. Whether or not you initially retain that attorney is up to you, but make sure that you seek a consult so that you understand all of the laws in your state. You may want to look online for references, ask for referrals from other lawyers who know which attorneys focus their practice on the area of family law, And of course, you can also ask for referrals from friends who've gone through a recent divorce. If you have a complex financial situation or do not feel that you have significant financial experience, consult a financial specialist in divorce. That's what I am. There's a lot of individuals who specialize in this out there. They can help you organize your financial information into a more readily understandable format, educate you on the financial implications of the decisions that are available, help you make decisions that will hopefully enable you to have a stronger financial future post-divorce. Those are all very important factors. And then lastly, talk to a counselor, especially if you have children. While this is obviously not my area of expertise, I have found that my clients who have sought the assistance of mental health professionals, whether it's psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors, life coaches, etc., who specialize in this area, that those clients seem to be much more equipped to rationalize and deal with the extremely difficult, emotionally charged landscape of divorce and the financial considerations that go with it. Number 4, consider closing all joint accounts, including bank and credit card accounts, and inform your investment manager of the pending divorce. Now, this is a really tricky area when you're trying to manage ongoing communications. First of all, it's imperative that you protect yourself financially, which is why I have this recommendation as number 4. If you're concerned that your spouse may move money, run up credit card debt, sell assets, then closing or freezing accounts as soon as possible may be absolutely necessary. If, however, you're just getting started with this divorce and you're concerned that this kind of action might actually be viewed as negative by your spouse and you want to try to maintain status quo from a financial perspective, then you might not need to do this right away. If you don't do this right away, I still strongly recommend that you alert your bankers and your financial advisors and your investment representatives that you have a pending divorce, that there is a pending divorce. I would recommend that you let them know in writing so that they will be aware that all joint accounts are going to require joint signatures prior to any actions being taken to move money. Keep a close eye on all checking and savings accounts. Make sure that you over-communicate with your spouse and do it in writing if you're going to move money, if you're going to make large purchases, because oftentimes it's common for a couple who want to keep joint accounts open, want to have their operating scenario continue. They've been doing it this way for 15, 30 years. It's just easier to keep these operating accounts the same, but it's also extremely common for settlement negotiations to start, going sideways over one single large purchase or money that was moved if it wasn't discussed. So again, this is sort of a tricky area to consider, but it's an area where where I think that you need to use your best judgment, protect yourself first, and over communicate in the second scenario. And that takes me to step number 5. Definitely want to open a checking account and a credit card in your own name as soon as possible. Move some dollar amount, whether it's $100 or whatever is appropriate in your situation, into that checking account and let both your attorney and your spouse know in writing that you've taken this step. You want to set the example of full disclosure early on. Also regarding credit cards, it can sometimes be difficult to obtain credit post-divorce, because perhaps you might not qualify or you qualify for less credit without the dual income. So the sooner that you apply for credit in your own name, the better. So that rounds out the top 5 actions. I know we've gone through them really quickly, but these are the top 5 actions that I would recommend taking immediately upon separation or learning that a divorce is going to take place. We're going to be right back with David Kroll of Mortgage Network to discuss some special situations involving the mortgage aspect, refinancing, and other challenges that our current economy and that the credit markets are creating for divorcing couples. We'll be right back to speak with him. Please stick with us. This is Money Matters. I'm Emily Johnson, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Money Matters. We're joined today by David Kroll of Mortgage Network to discuss the mortgage lender's role in the financial planning team around divorce. And also, I work quite a bit with David, so we have a lot of experience in this together. I thought that we'd be able to bring out some great key points because real estate and because mortgage and credit are such interesting and challenging factors when it comes to divorce in our current economy. So number 1, David, I know you and I work quite a bit together as a team in divorce financial planning. What is your role in this team as you view it?
Basically, if you begin with the proposition that a divorce is a right angle turn in someone's life, it's a major event in someone's life. If it's easier to conceptualize it if you think of the fact that any major change, any right angle turn in someone's life, really needs a whole team of people. It causes ripples in all directions. It's very nice if the team happens to involve somebody who's financially savvy. So it really comes down to who's first contact. If your relationship with your financial advisor is a particularly close one, then that's the point of first contact. If the relationship with your mortgage banker happens to be a particularly close and friendly one, that's a point of first contact.
Well, and oftentimes real estate, and specifically your primary residence, is the largest asset in a marriage, especially a long-term marriage. Of course, a lot of homes these days are underwater, but typically between a retirement account and the home are the largest assets to consider in divorce. So it makes sense that a mortgage lender,
That's
could be that person.
that's absolutely the case. If you take the house separately from the divorce equation, it represents the largest single asset in any estate, in most estates.
So let's talk about two places where this happens. So number one, we oftentimes have clients that come to us that either need to refinance out of a house because they want to get one party's name off of the mortgage in a divorce, and other times we have somebody that wants to refinance a house in order to take equity out to finance the divorce, perhaps to pay for or to use that equity to pay off the other spouse. So let's talk first about the scenario where somebody needs to refinance the house to take a name off of the mortgage when the person who wants to retain the mortgage is the non-breadwinning spouse.
Exactly. It really comes down to who wants to remain in the house.
Let's say, for example, that the mother of 3 children wants to remain in the house.
Right.
She's been a stay-at-home mother for 20 years,
Right.
still has 2 teenage kids at home, and the husband wants his name off the mortgage as part of this divorce.
Then that man had best become acquainted with alimony real quick.
Right.
And that's why talking to you and I, often at the same time as or even before you go to the attorneys, is a real good idea, because we can set the ground rules.
Right.
I mean, it's no good agreeing with an attorney and having months of fighting. It's no good agreeing to something that doesn't, in the end, serve your purposes.
Well, I know many times I'll come to you as we're putting together alimony or spousal support scenarios where we have a mortgage that's going to need to be refinanced, and say, okay, David, here's a mortgage of, say, $350,000, in a 15-year mortgage and a 30-year mortgage. What kind of income is this woman going to need to be earning in order to refinance this mortgage? And you're able to back into that number so that we're not making promises, in a scenario that we can't necessarily keep in terms of refinancing that home.
That's precisely correct. And that's a really good point, because up front, before everybody's super angry with each other and before positions have been taken, when the numbers are still soft, when they're still negotiable,
Right.
That's absolutely critical, because if I'm able to say to you, gee, she's got to have $78,000 a year in alimony, and he's able to say, I haven't got nearly that amount of money available,
Then we have to sell
then
the
we
house.
have to sell the house.
Right.
We save months and months and months of agony by getting to that point right
And
up
there's
front.
always a lot of emotion tied around the
Oh,
marital
Lord,
home, or
yes.
typically there is.
Yeah, but a lot of that can be sorted out. The vice versa as well. If the man wants to keep the house, then we can refinance the house, take $100,000 out of it, half the equity, and write a check to the woman.
As opposed to having to wait for the home to sell 5 years
correct.
down the road
That's
and
correct.
leave it up to fate.
That's correct. Depending on who the major breadwinner is, and I've seen it go every which way. I mean, sometimes the woman is the major breadwinner, and it's a proposition where she's taking money out and giving it to the ex-husband. This is absolutely non-sexist territory. It's
black and white finance.
It's black and white finance, but it's motivated by who wants to stay in the house, and who's got the income to support this transaction.
Really quickly, I spent the beginning part of this show talking about the top 5 steps that people should take as they enter the divorce process, or perhaps if they're considering it. And one thing we talked about was information that people should be gathering. When people come to you with these types of questions, what information do you ask them for up front, or what do you want them to come with so that you can provide them with expedient results and answers?
Everyone hears horror stories about the mortgage process. In order for me to know who you are and where you're headed, I really only need last year's tax returns, a pay stub, a recent bank statement, a recent security statement. That's about it.
And this can all be done confidentially, right? I think that's a somewhat
Completely.
important point. If somebody is considering a divorce and looking at their scenarios to try to gauge what it's going to look like after the fact, they can come to you, ask you this kind of information, and not have it be something that becomes public record, correct?
No, absolutely. It is the most private place that you can possibly imagine. Think psychotherapy, think local priest, that's her, that's me. The information, especially on a small island, goes nowhere.
Right. What other factors do you consider when you're looking at whether a foreclosure, short sale, or a refi is appropriate in a divorce situation? Really quickly, because I know we only have a few minutes, but what are the factors that you consider, the first factors that you consider when somebody comes to you with that question of, is a foreclosure right, is a short sale right, or, can we refi?
This credit issue often arises in a couple that's divorcing, and they're already, if there's a credit issue already on the table, if they've already been missing payments, if they've already run up $70,000 or $80,000 worth of credit cards, and this is all part and parcel of why they're unhappy with each other and getting divorced,
right?
Then it's really what gets them disentangled most efficiently in the shortest possible piece of time.
Okay.
And what gets them disentangled is to notify their lender, we're getting divorced, we'd like to sell the property and get it listed,
Right.
and,
Put an end to it.
consult a short sale expert.
Because it's going to take a while.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I'd really love it if you could come back, because I know we're going to have some special circumstances around divorce we're going to talk about in future shows. So thank you very much for your time.
It's my pleasure.
And thank you very much for joining us this week on Money Matters. We'll be back next week to talk about critical financial errors in divorce and some special circumstances related to divorce. So I hope that you'll join us next week here on WHHI, where your money matters. Thanks very much.